Hey guys, welcome to the deck tech for my new deck. Torrential Rock is what I'm calling it. This is a green-black based deck that runs Torrent Elemental as a way of mimicking Eternal Scourge and Mist Hollow Griffin, which are the two main cards that do this, that have this ability that have been played frequently. Essentially, it presents a threat that's very hard to deal with whenever you continue to exile this creature. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the creature base first. So we have Grimflayer to start. First of all, this is not Tarmogoyf. This is not a Tarmogoyf list. While Tarmogoyf is really obviously a very powerful 2-mana creature, this list aims to actually just get a lot of card advantage through the cards it plays rather than having a really beefy beater a lot of the time. So Grimflayer operates as a Dark Confidant sort of card where it cycles through, it says, okay, I don't need these things, I could really use that, and it puts things in the graveyard that you can then recycle with other cards in your deck, which we'll talk about. So in that way, it provides some sense of card advantage. And then, kind of in tandem with that, we have 2 Courser Crucifix, which allows you to draw extra land cards. If you didn't play with Courser and Crucifix in Standard, it's a super powerhouse in terms of life gain. It's also a really great way to help thin out your library by getting you extra lands, and then you fetch, and then now you're out 2 cards by doing that. Courser with Tireless Tracker is fantastic. I've had them both on the field one time, and it was mayhem. So much card advantage is generated. Tireless Tracker is also a very good engine. So in that way you have a total of 7 really, really good card advantage engines early on in terms of like drawing and getting through your deck. Other threats that we have include Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze combos really nicely with Torrent Elemental. Oh darn, my Elemental died. I'll exile it and then play it again. Well, not play it, put it into play. That distinction, important to note. It's also, again, another way of gaining life, and it can combat Snapcasters, Dredge, all that good stuff. So, Scavenging Ooze is a very powerful card that can do a lot of different things. Kalidas, again, actually very good against Dredge, but more importantly, it's just it's a card that can win the game on its own. It's a 3/4 that can become huge, barring removal, and a lot of the time it's going to get you a field of zombies. So just a really powerful 4-drop threat, which warrants the 2 of for a legendary. 3 Tassigers, another legendary creature that can come down really early as a 4/5. This is our Tarmogoyf type card, except it has the additional ability of producing yet more card advantage. We might have to be careful that we don't mill ourselves, but in general, his ability is quite good as a way to find more things to get into your hand. In terms of disruption, we have 3 Inquisitions of Kozilek and 3 Thoughtseize. These are pretty much staples in green-black decks in the modern format. For anyone who doesn't play them, they allow you to look at your opponent's hand, take a card from them, which essentially gives you the ability to avoid removal, make your creatures stick more often than not. Maelstrom Pulse is kind of your answer all. It can deal with any threat at any point in time, which makes it a very powerful card, and thus it is included. Our instant speed removal includes 4 Abrupt Decay. It's one of the most powerful cards in the format in terms of removal because it can deal with planeswalkers, artifacts, anything with converted mana cost 3 or less, which in tandem with Inquisition just kills people's early game. It is quite taxing, really. So Abrupt Decays are really good for basically any matchup except for probably Tron. Hero's Downfall, this is just another kind of answer all. Not everything, but it does kill creatures or planeswalkers, which are 2 of the major threats in the format. One of Murderous Cut. This is another way of delving. I didn't talk about that part about Tassiger, but Tassiger and Murderous Cut are another way of getting your Torrent Elemental from your graveyard into exile, which is an important ability to have. And lastly, Putrefy. Putrefy is mostly in here just as another way of removing things. I like that things can't be regenerated. Will this stay in the list? Not sure yet. I guess we'll find out. But for now, I think it's a pretty powerful card, and it has served me well thus far. Lastly, we have Planeswalkers. What better way to generate card advantage than Planeswalkers? So Garruk Relentless is one of my favorite Planeswalkers of all time. He has two abilities. His first is a 0 that lightning bolts something, that creature, or a creature in particular. That creature deals damage to him equal to its power. If he survives and he has 2 or few counters on him, transform him. We'll get to that in a second. His other 0 cost abilities put a 2/2 dude on the field, which is also often relevant as producing blockers is key to defending your Planeswalkers. Oh, come on, look at there it is. Okay, so his flip is put a 1/1 Death Touch creature on the battlefield, sacrifice a creature if you do, tutor a creature card and put it in your hand, and his -3 is Craterhoof Behemoth, where X is equal to the number of cards in your graveyard, which is really good with all of the self-mill type things that we have in our deck. So I finally found a home for my, one of my favorite Planeswalkers of all time. So I'm pretty stoked about that. Running 3 Lilianas. This Liliana in particular her -2 works very well with our deck. In terms of, again, making sure that our creatures actually can't be removed. You keep putting creatures back in your hand, which gives you a lot of card advantage. Her +1 is actually very relevant in a lot of matchups, including like Green, White, Death, and Taxes, or Hate Bears, whichever you prefer to call it. Affinity, she's really quite good against. Infect, her +1 is quite good against. So she does a lot against a lot of the decks in the field. And I think that she's quite a potent card. As for our mana base, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's got shocks, an island, and a breeding pool. I prefer to have at least one of each basic to cast my cards. It's got 3 Treetop Village because I prefer Treetop Village to Hissing Quagmire, because I think the 3/3 beater is just a little bit better than the Death Touch. Although this could be 2/2 probably and not be terribly ineffective. As far as the fetches, if I had more money, the 4 deltas would become 4 catacombs. The Windswept Heaths would be a 2/2 split of Misty Rainforest and Polluted Delta. But I don't have the cash for that, so this is where I am. But if you wanted to do that, that is within your jurisdiction. In the sideboard, 1 Pithing Needle is just again, it's one of those, versatile cards that can deal with a lot of different decks. Kitchen Finks and Thragtusk are both life gain creatures. They do it in a little bit of a different way, but each of them has a potent ETB effect for gaining life and has a lot of resilience, which again is kind of what I'm looking for in this deck list. 1 Choke. Our islands aren't all that important because you only really need to cast Tor and Elemental once, and the rest of the time you just put it on the battlefield without using blue. And Choke does a really good job against things like Jeskai, or maybe not so much Grixis, Merfolk when they don't have a Vial out, so it can do a decent amount of work. Triple Leyline of the Void, this is specifically targeting Dredge because Dredge is a pain in the butt to play against in the format right now. It's also quite good against Grixis, although I wouldn't bring in all 3, I don't think, against Grixis control. So yeah, that's kind of Leyline, I think, is an important card, although I wish I didn't have to run 3 of them. Dismember is good against, the mirror match. Obviously, you won't be playing against this deck in particular, most likely, but you'll be playing against things that run Siege Rhinos, Goyfs, etc., and you'll want to be able to kill those things. So Dismember is one option to do that. Golgari Charm. This card is just really versatile. Destroy an enchantment, sweep a bunch of small creatures, save a creature from removal, etc. Vraska is kind of a flex spot. Could be a Batter Skull. Could be a number of different things. Right now it's Vraska. I'll probably see that I don't board her in very often and just take her out. But again, she's one of those cards that I just really like, and so I wanted to include her in the list. Most likely won't stay. But what I really like about her is her -3 ability, and I like cards that just allow you to win the game. Although that player loses the game is a little bit different than winning, phrasing wise. But I think that her -3 is amazing. So her -3 is destroy target non-land permanent. She is a Maelstrom Pulse with additional abilities, which I think is fantastic. She protects herself really well with her +1, which helps her get to her -7. So I like her in the kind of green-black mirrors and stuff like that. Sorcery speed removal, or sorcery speed interaction, I suppose. We have collective brutality. I think this card comes in more often than any other card. It kills aggressive creatures. It can be good against control decks because it can get rid of an instant or sorcery card. And it can gain you 2 life and have your opponent 2 life, which is another good mechanic against aggro decks. Creeping Corrosion. This is a screw you to Lantern Control and Affinity. Affinity is probably a little bit better of a matchup, but Lantern Control can suck it. I absolutely abhor playing against that deck, so I want to make sure that I can beat him. Double Damnation. This is really good against the Bant Coco lists, Bant Eldrazi and Taxes. Basically anything that's running a bunch of creatures and is trying to swarm against you. It being 4 mana is super awesome. I love Modern because we don't have to wait till turn 6 to sweep the board. And then finally, the 1 Duress. Again, this is good against the control matchups in order to blank the removal even more than you're already doing with your creatures. So with that said, this is our deck list as of now. Let's get into some matches. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in those matches.